Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So first, this is going to be recorded. So first and foremost, if you wouldn't mind, please make sure to silence your phones or anything that might make any noise. And do know that the room is recorded. So you probably saw some signs outside, but thank you very much for your consent to being recorded. Don't worry, the cameras will mostly be focused up here. So my name is Zach Henderson, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of introducing the couple that I view as the preeminent technology power couple, and that is the husband and wife team of Professor Robin Feldman and her husband, Boris Feldman. So a little bit of information about them both. So Boris is a lawyer at the Freshfields Law Firm, which operates in 28 cities across 18 different countries. He is the global co-head of their tech, media, and telecoms practice and defends technology companies in shareholder and M&A suits. Boris has represented most of the major companies in Silicon Valley, including Google, Palantir, Salesforce, and hundreds of others. He has also represented well-known entrepreneurs, people like Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Andreessen, and Herb Boyer. Boris received his undergrad and law degrees from Yale and has lectured both at his alma mater and at Berkeley, Stanford, and Harvard. Boris is known for his ever-present bow tie, and Chambers USA has called him the king of Silicon Valley, and it is such a pleasure to have him here today. And I would love to introduce someone who I get to work with very closely, and that is Professor Robin Feldman, who is the Arthur J. Goldberg Distinguished Professor of Law here at the law school, UC Law SF. She is founder and director of the AI Law and Innovation Institute and the law school's flagship program, the Startup Legal Garage. Robin received her JD from Stanford Law School, where she graduated, very unsurprisingly to me, Order of the Coif, and was awarded the Institute's honor for graduating second in her class. Professor Feldman is an award-winning teacher and scholar who has authored 4 books, soon to be more, and more than 80 articles in law journals as well as in leading economic and medical journals. Her work has been called absolutely remarkable and a must-read. Robin provides technical advice and testimony to congressional committees and government agencies on various innovation topics and responded to a staggering 55 requests just last year alone. She is frequently in the public eye, having given more than 750 press interviews over the past decade. Her areas of emphasis include law and AI, law and innovation, and competition. I'm very excited about this conversation. As some of you may know, Robin has a forthcoming book with Cambridge University Press in which she engages with artificial intelligence and what it means for intellectual property, titled AI and IP, Rethinking Creativity. I'm particularly interested in hearing Robin discuss and describe how she actually used AI to help her write this incredible book on AI. So without further ado, everyone please welcome Professor Robin Feldman and her husband, Boris Feldman.
Thank you, Zach, for that really generous introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay, so 2 caveats first. Anything, I'm not going to talk, I'm just going to ask questions, but anything I say is mine and shouldn't be imputed to any of the clients of my firm. And second, Professor Feldman and I are doing this talk without waiving any spousal privileges.
I hadn't thought of that, thank you.
I came up with a few questions to ask. Number 1, did we file the extension on our tax return? Oh wait, it's the wrong list. So this talk arose out of jealousy. So recently my wife said to me, I have a confession to make. There's a new man in my life. I found this interesting. I said, really? Tell me more. She said, his name is Claude. Claude is one of the AI tools she's used, and she's been spending more time with Claude lately than she has with me. She drove me over the edge one day when she said, I have a date today. I said, really? With whom? She said, Grok. So she's going to tell you about her new special friends, Claude and Grok. Watching Robin learn for this book, the book she's going to talk about in 1 second was not written by AI, but she used AI tools at a very deep level to learn some things she needed for the book. And as we were talking about it, I thought that would probably be very useful to impart to your students, how you used it and what it could and couldn't do. So that's what today is about. I want to start by asking you about the book. What is it about? When will it be out?
The book is called AI versus IP, which is how we did the Feldman versus Feldman title of the podcast. It'll be out, God willing, this summer, hopefully by May, maybe June. And the book is about how artificial intelligence is causing us, or should cause us, to rethink everything about intellectual property. What is it meant to protect? What are we protecting? Why are we protecting? How is it that we are protecting these things? Is the system really about protecting humans and human innovation? Because all the language in the Constitution and the law suggests it's about humans. Do we care more about progress even if we lose humans in the dust? And how do we trust anything that we see out there, anything that's produced these days, when we don't think we can trust any information that comes anywhere? So the book looks at copyright, patent, trademark, trade secret, and right of publicity, and goes through many of these different issues, and does have its solutions out there too, but you have to get the book for that.
For those of you here who are law students, and any law students who are watching this after the AI Institute posts it online, this is at least the next 5 to 10 years of your career, maybe more. And in some ways, the most obvious battleground initially for AI will be intellectual property. But it's going to affect every other professor that you have as much as it does people like Professor Feldman who teach intellectual property. So whether it's corporate law or litigation or international law, they're all going to be revolutionized by not necessarily by the use of AI tools, but by the legal issues that arise involving AI. So everybody started paying attention to AI about 2.5 years ago when OpenAI released ChatGPT. Is that when you first became interested in AI and law, or does it go back a little farther than 2 years ago?
My goodness, it goes back a lot more than 2 years ago. I was looking at the pieces in the first academic article I wrote on an AI topic was 20 years ago. We weren't really calling it AI then. It was about this futuristic newfangled stuff called biometric identification. And there was some talk that we would be able to do facial recognition, maybe even retinal scanning. It wasn't working very well then, but it opened up a whole set of issues. That was the beginning for me. And I started getting calls for technical advice from government entities maybe 8 or 10 years ago. I was absolutely sure that this issue would burst into the public consciousness, that it was right around the corner. I was about 10 years early. But eventually it made it there. In terms of what Boris was saying about how much this is part of your life and your career, the AI Institute is in the process of creating modules for all the classes throughout the law school so that you can see where AI fits into every single one of the doctrinal areas you're studying, and then we'll make those available for everybody. But I couldn't overemphasize how much you will interact with AI issues for the foreseeable future.
So as you were writing the book, which is now at least the first major edition of it is submitted, why did you start to use AI in preparing the book, and what did you use it for?
I wanted to create an analogy that would help people understand AI at a very deep level, not at a superficial level, but at a very deep level with no math. It's hard. I've done a lot of science writing, so I've done this before in other topics, and so I have some confidence I could pull it off. But this is really difficult, and to do it at that level, I needed to really understand AI at a deep level, and one that was beyond where I was. I was very proud in college that I got through, the 3rd semester of calculus and some computer programming, but the math that was needed to understand this was the next level up. And so I tried to ask people to explain things to me, and I started reading, and I just wasn't getting it at the depth that I needed. So one of my colleagues who is an expert in AI and statistics said to me, just try Claude. And I thought, well,
There's that damn guy again, Claude.
So, okay, you know, 'cause I used large language models. As soon as ChatGPT came out, I used that. I've used Gemini. I've played around with a lot of them. You probably don't know this, but I had subscriptions to all of my boyfriends. But anyway, I pay them on the side. But so, I went on to Claude and I said, okay, teach me. And I started asking it questions. And what I found was that Claude was a spectacular teacher, which probably shouldn't be a great surprise, because if you've got an issue, an area like math or basic science, where the information isn't going to be in doubt. I mean, you're not going to ask it a question like, was this politician telling the truth last week? And you see Joe Blogger on the latest rant. The large language model is going to be searching for various sources that all agree on what a vector is and what a matrix is. So it's going to have good information. And large language models and different generative models have been known, in at least the computer world, for being really good at debugging. Do you all know what debugging is? So computer code people, I remember this. You write your computer code and then you run it and it doesn't work. And so then you got to print out every step, or at least this is what we did in our very old days. And then you sit there in the middle of the night looking line by line and trying to find where you made a mistake. Well, because what these models do is compare somebody's code to lots of code that was out there and try to predict where it comes next. They can see where what you put next was wrong and isn't going to work. So what I found in these models, they could do the same thing with my logic. They could debug my logic and say, yes, you're right up to here, but this is the concept where you start to get lost a little bit. So now let's focus in on this topic. And I saw it over and over again. As someone who loves good teaching, it was a good teacher and I could appreciate it. But it was a remarkable interchange. And then I would begin to use some of the others. I would go and see Grok. And I would have them play off each other, because I'd get to a point where I would say, okay, I can't get anything more out of Claude. Maybe Grok can help me on this point. And it was that type of interaction that gave me an extraordinary understanding of what was going on.
You had access to friends who were very accomplished in math and in other scientific issues involved in large language models. How did you compare their ability to educate you as opposed to the AI programs themselves?
Okay, I will say the AI programs are much better. I am fortunate to have friends who are certified math geniuses, who are working for some of the leading AI companies. And what would happen is I would ask them questions, and my questions were too basic. So the only way they could answer them was at a very high level, because there were a lot of things I needed in order to get there. Or I would get an answer like, how does the transformation level of the large language model interact with what the attention heads are doing at this moment? I asked this question of one of the coders at one of the major AI startups, and he looked at me and he said, I don't do that stuff. I just know how to use it and code it. So I really could get much more and much deeper. Also, another thing that makes them good teachers is that they're infinitely patient. It's something that we've seen with AI in the medical field, that some very large studies have shown that in terms of being the intake physician, AI ranks better than all but the most skilled doctors. And the hypothesis is that the AI doesn't get impatient, the AI isn't tired at the end of the day, the AI isn't frustrated that you're asking the same question you asked a half hour ago, and that level of interaction is helpful. I found that for myself too. It was a great teacher.
Should we short the teaching profession?
No. Because one of the things I found is that it was wonderful as a tool in combination with other things. And that's my view of AI completely, that it's best and greatest role is human assist, human augmentation, not human replacement. There were a lot of things that it couldn't do. And when I started out, I said, okay, I don't see this. Okay, I want to write. Here's a hypothetical. I want to write, and I want to find a way to speak to people who don't understand math. So, craft an analogy for me. And I went to lots of the different sites, and I can't tell you how many analogies to cooking, to this kind of cooking, to building a house, to sailing on the ocean. I know lots of them. They weren't good. They had internal contradictions. They left parts out. They weren't understandable. You needed a human in the process. And more than that, you needed a human to ask them the right questions. If you weren't asking the right questions, if I wasn't engineering it, if I wasn't a good student, I couldn't get the best out of it. So one of the things I left this experience really not feeling that I worry about the teaching profession, but understanding that my role in teaching and the teaching role in general is you have to teach people really critical thinking skills. We may teach fewer of certain basic skills. I don't think we're going to be teaching as much low-level computer coding as we used to generally, but we have to teach them how to think enough so that they can do the higher level work. Because the LLMs, when I asked them to produce something, it was truly mediocre. It was helpful in fixing things along the way, but it couldn't do the really soaring stuff. That's what the humans can do if we train our students to keep thinking. If we let them just rely on this stuff, then the human brain and human productivity will be truly mediocre across time.
The skill set you develop will be very important. When I was in law school, in the era of typewriters, Lexis and Westlaw were new, and it became important to learn how to do Boolean operators. That's not a tribe from somewhere exotic. It was how you use interrelated terms in doing a complicated search. By the time our kids were growing up, we had to teach them the importance of formulating good search queries, because one way to distinguish yourself is, are you really good at Google and finding stuff? Now it seems to me that all of you are going to have to master, I think the term you used was prompt engineering, which does not mean building a bridge quickly. What can you tell them about how to learn to create the right prompts?
Like some of it is a part of knowing what the capacities of the system are that you're working with and how to move and weave between them. And that takes a fair amount of time and attention. Do you also have to think about, you have to understand where you were trying to go. You cannot simply sit down in front of a computer and say, fix my problems for me, tell me how to do this, what I would. To get good use out of these things requires your own intense thinking and preparation. So it's interactive, but there were some, I think there were some really wonderful moments. So Claude, who's the leading guy in my life. Second divorce right now.
Let's see if Claude can tie a bow tie.
Yeah. So Claude can't do images. So it's not going to create very much in the way of images. You can ask it to, but it runs out pretty quickly. And I think Grok, it's the other way around. Grok doesn't create images, but Grok will give you instructions on creating images. So I think it was Grok that I asked to write out instructions for an image that I wanted, and then I went to Claude, and Claude did the image, because when I asked Claude to do the image, it ran out and said, well, you've exceeded how much we can do here. And so I used the two, and it was understanding how to put them together, and then I would go back and forth between that, and then looking on YouTube for some videos explaining things. And by the end, I had Gemini rolled in a little bit, but that had a different type of skill that I think probably law students will appreciate, which is I was using the research version, which is a little bit slower, but I wanted to know where I could find things like data sources, and I wanted a summary of what data had been uncovered in certain areas and where I could actually look down in the data. And I would get these marvelous 10 or 20 page reports along with the sources underneath and instructions on how to find within the sources. What I loved about that is it would give me a research plan and say, here's how Gemini is going to do the research you've asked. And I could say, oh, wait, no, I didn't ask it that, or I didn't think I was asking it that. I meant something different. And I could see it, and then it would go off and do the research plan. So they're simply extraordinary tools. They're very exciting to work with. A little terrifying, but exciting.
So not to push a client, but the title of the Gemini tool is Deep Research, and they have it at several different levels. And the first time you use it, you're going to be quite amazed by it. So to me, one takeaway from what you learned and are teaching them is, don't just embark on a task by saying, I'm going to use X.AI for this, or I'm going to use Llama for this. You may find that to do your really best work, you need to use multiple tools, and you need to force them to interact. They're not connected together, so you have to figure out how to connect things from one to another. How did you decide which tools to use when?
That was trial and error. And I will say that one of the weaknesses of the tools is they don't play nice with other kids. They don't play well among the tools, and they don't play well with the some of the things that you use in everyday life. Word that you use a lot, or so I found it very difficult to download or cut and paste to keep what I have gotten, or to put information in from one to the next. They had different forms, so I'm sure they will get better at that. But the things I was used to took a little effort. On the other hand, one of my genius friends went into one of the LLMs and said, here's the schedule for my children's school conferences. Here's a program that can put things into my Apple Calendar. Convert this and put it in my Apple Calendar, and it was all done. I mean, you can really do a lot with these, but you gotta play with them, see what's there.
To what extent did you push back on some of the answers you got, challenge them, push them harder? And what was typically the reaction of the AI tool when you did that?
Again, this is part of my encouragement to the next generations of you can't just rely on these models. What you will get is mediocrity or worse. So I would work with the information I got and then try to work my way through. I would often come back and say, you said X, but it's not consistent with this, or it doesn't seem to fit here. And then the AI would come back and say, oh, you're right, sorry about that. And then regroup. The one that just drove me crazy was very early on. I asked my buddy Claude to try to help me with crafting part of the image I was using in mapping Washington, D.C., which is the image I finally ended up with. And I went through, and I was early in understanding the math underneath it, and it just didn't make sense. And I spent 2 days trying to make sense. And finally, I thought, well, I'm going to ask it. So I went on and I said, I just don't understand this and that. And the Claude came back and said, that's a really good point. Sorry, we switched metaphors in the middle of it. So even though it looks as if the streets should be the same thing as as subways, we were thinking about different things at that point. We'd switched. And it's like, well, thanks a lot. It took me 2 days to figure out that you were wrong. But so you really can't just accept stuff.
Sometimes they err in the other direction. And I don't use AI nearly as much as Robin does, but sometimes they'll give me an answer and I'll say, "Are you sure?" And they often say, "You're right. Sorry, I got that wrong," even though they were right. There's something programmed, maybe because they're all basically alpha levels, not even beta levels yet, that they're often overly apologetic. I don't know if you found that.
I think it must be the way you carry yourself. I mean, Boris carries himself with such authority. I think anyone would do that. When I put things in the LLMs and say, "Is this wrong?" Sometimes they come back and they say, "You're doing a very nice job, but here's where you're misunderstanding." I will say that I've found Grok the most encouraging of all the teachers. So, some of the others say, "Nice question, good job," but Grok really, I'm trying to remember, when I first started, I said, "Okay, here's what I understand, and here's where I get lost." And the response from Grok was something like, "Thank you for showing me where you are. I really appreciate it. It's clear that you have an intuitive understanding of some of the key parts, but it seems that you're getting lost at the attention heads. So let's go back to the beginning and we'll build up to where the attention heads are to make the piece fit together right." And I felt like, the star student in the classroom. Wow, I'm getting this stuff. It was a good teacher banter.
And then it said, "Please deposit another quarter."
Yes. You can spend a lot on this stuff.
At the end of the day, how long was the period between the first time you started using an AI program to help you understand the deep math behind LLMs and now? What length?
About a month. It was about a month's time. And, I'm teaching and doing a few other things in the background.
And what most surprised you, compared to what you expected to get out of AI going into it, and now that you've gotten good at using it, what most surprised you about it?
I am endlessly surprised at how sophisticated these programs are, and it's a good reminder of how quickly they're changing. There were different iterations that came out during this period, that had new features and new levels of ability along the way. I will say that one of the things that I found a little troubling was how quickly I descended into interacting with the computer as a person, addressing it as "you said," and just in the second person, not the third person. I could understand how people can get so absorbed in them that they forget that this is a mathematical prediction of what the next most likely best word is based on probable relationships on many different levels of analysis. So that's a little sobering to think about.
One of the things you and people in television land have to be careful for is that you're following the rules of engagement for whatever organization you're using this in the context of. So if you're at a law firm, you want to make sure you're using approved AI tools in ways that your law firm says you can do it and without waiving privileges. If you're a student, you want to make sure you don't get in trouble for cheating by how you're using AI. What do you think the current state, I know it varies teacher to teacher, but what's your take on the current state in law school, in your law school, about permitted and not permitted uses of AI?
My sense is that people are scrambling and that there's nothing consistent out there. I suspect even among my colleagues, we do it differently. I say, as those of you who are my students know, if you want to use artificial intelligence tools, that's fine. Here are some of the limitations, but I need you to tell me and show me your prompt history. And I'm going to take all of that into consideration when I see the product and when I evaluate it. I will say that even doing this, I ran into the issue of are there problems with how I'm interacting? So eventually, I got to the point where I have what you'll see in the book, if you read the book, is a nice, maybe 10-page section setting out everything you need to understand about an LLM without ever having any math. So that's what I did, and I thought I started feeding that into the LLM models, and my first thought was, oh, that's my work. I'm an IP professor. That's my, that expression is my copyright. I put it out there, and that's the next training information, and they'll use that to answer somebody else's question. And I thought about it a second. I thought, well, as a professor, as an academic, what I want is for my ideas to be out there. What I really want is for everybody to understand it the way I've set it out there, even if they never understand that it came from me. And so I went ahead and put it in. We'll see what happens.
When you get work from a student, do you often find yourself thinking, this reads like ChatGPT, or is that not really an issue?
I have, especially in the beginning. I mean, I think students didn't understand how absolutely apparent it is when they did that stuff. And for me, again, in my classrooms, and I think all professors should do this, I will, people don't turn in work and then just go. I will ask you questions and engage with it. And so it's very clear if someone has gotten material from somewhere else that they haven't thought about it because they can't engage in any discussion about it. But more than that, it really is mediocre. You will never see, at this point, great thinking coming out of those materials.
When I edit a brief that someone gives me in draft, my greatest insult is to say this reads as if it were written by ChatGPT. That's not a compliment. Do we have time for a few questions?
I think we do. Where are we on time for the whole thing? Do we have
another 10 minutes? Okay.
We have another 10 minutes. So we can definitely take some questions. You're right here.
They have a mic for you.
Professor Feldman, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. We're very excited for your book. My question is the following. Are you worried that the rise of AI might exacerbate existing social and economic inequalities, given that individuals and communities with access to and proficiency in these tools may advance more quickly, while others risk being left behind?
Thank you so much. I do worry about that. I think that AI has extraordinary potential in leveling the playing field. So for someone whose native language isn't English or isn't the domestic language in whatever country they're in, AI tools can give you an extraordinary leg up. Some of the things that are being developed are very good even at language teaching, so you can learn them better. But also, you can get a spectacular looking resume. You can put in the reports you're supposed to do at work, and suddenly it will look more on a level playing field with someone who's a native speaker. On the other hand, to get the best out of these new tools, you have to know how to engage in critical thinking, you know how to use them. And so the question will we be able to have throughout our education system the ability of our teachers to know how to teach these things so that everybody benefits them? Otherwise, I think we will have we will just make the gaps larger that are in society.
All of you have a big advantage on this because you're young, and AI is a young person's game. And I say that to the lawyers I work with all the time. It is such a transformational shift in how you work, in how you think, in how you learn, that people who are older, who are now generally pretty facile with computers, pretty good at search, this is so radically different that I think it's tailored for younger minds. And I think you'll find in every organization, whether it's academic or an investment bank or a tech company or a law firm, I think you're going to find that this is a great tool for younger people that might not work as well for older folks in the organization.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because it needs a certain flexibility of approach that those of us who've been around a very, very long time probably aren't used to. And so it's pretty difficult. Other questions, folks? Anything else? Yes, please. We'll get the mic over for you.
Thank you both. My question is, I guess, about how the U.S. Copyright Office released the report on the copyrightability of AI in January of this year, and I'm curious if your conversations with Claude and Grok included topics that were more legal, or if your conversations led you to understand the report's decision about copyrightability and how that differs from your thought process after your conversations with.
Oh, thank you. So this particular month of dancing with different generative models was not about legal topics. It was really about math and science topics and writing, trying to craft something well. But as an IP professor, I do watch those reports, and I have tried interacting, asking it legal questions. And I will say so far, I'm not deeply impressed with any of the abilities on legal questions. They are a great place to start, but they are not a great place to end. They're sometimes, and again, it's that higher level thinking. It's what I always try to say to students is that if you could find an answer in Black's Law Dictionary, they wouldn't need to pay you a whole lot. The skill in law is crafting an answer out of things that are a little bit different and trying to see the spaces between what's been decided before. That's not something that these models are very good at, in addition to sometimes just being downright wrong about what the law is. In terms of the Copyright Office, I have found that fascinating because the Copyright Office's view, and the same with the Patent Office, has been things created by AI are not protectable. Okay? Can't protect it if it's created by AI. So that's very easy, but the harder question is what's the line on how much you can use them as a tool and still say the human did it. And I will say, without boring everyone here who doesn't care as much as we do about copyright, that the line that the Copyright Office has chosen and how I'm seeing it in the first case coming out looks an awful lot like AI created that thing, and the human didn't seem to be doing all that much to me, but that's my opinion.
If you look for government regulation of AI, remember the people in Congress and in some of the agencies who are going to be designing these rules are even older than I am. And there are two takeaways from congressional hearings that will give you a sense of how talented they're going to be in regulating evolving large language models. One was when Mark Zuckerberg testified at a committee, and then Senator Orrin Hatch said to him, "Do you charge people to use Facebook?" And he said, "No, Senator." And Senator Hatch said, "Well, how do you make money?" And he said, "We sell ads." And that was a big revelation to the senators there. The other was when someone from Instagram was being asked about Finstas, which are, as you all know, fake Instagram accounts. It's not an offering of Instagram. They don't sell Finstas. And one of the senators, I think it was Blumenthal from Connecticut, kept saying, "Well, why don't you just turn it off?" Not understanding it. So it's easy for people in DC to say, oh, AI can't be responsible for a copyright or for a patent, but honestly, they don't have a clue. And by the time you are at a point where you're making those rules, it may be that you reject all the initial answers that are coming out now about how AI is or is not treated in every area of the law, because they're pretty much clueless.
The examples Boris just referenced they're not old. They're fairly recent. And as Zach's kind introduction pointed out, I spend a lot of time giving advice to congressional committees and regulators. I've been privileged to do this across 4 administrations, 2 Democratic and 2 Republican. So I will not cite any individuals or any individual exchanges, but I have been shocked how little people understand about basic technology. Even people who are out front in speaking and in a position to be making decisions about the AI policies really don't understand things about basic technology, let alone AI. My own view is anything we do is going to have to be an industry-government collaboration because industry has the power. The industry has the information and government has the power, and we're going to need both. But historically, industry and government, when you're talking about tech, haven't gone hand in hand a lot.
Should we let them go back to class?
No, it was the last question. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Feldman, for giving this talk. My question is, you briefly touched on prompt engineering, and I think that's very fascinating. And to what extent do you find the quality of an output given by AI is driven by adequate prompt engineering?
Oh, I think the prompt engineering is extraordinary. And I try this in my class. So right after ChatGPT came out, maybe a month after it, I gave one of my classes an assignment, and I gave them a question from the exam the year before. And I said, get an answer out of ChatGPT. And then you're going to critique each other's answers. And also have the prompts so we can watch the prompts. And the caliber of the answer people got completely ranged. And it did actually fall along the lines of how strong the student was in legal analysis at that point in their career as well. There was a remarkable correlation between those two. So what you're doing matters. You can't just use these tools to replace yourself, thank God. You can be helped by them, but they're not going to do it alone. Thank you all for being with us, and good luck in your wonderful careers ahead. Thank you, Boris.
Thank you.